Atelier, Resleriana, the Red Alchemist, and White Guardian is not only a game with a long title, but also a game with a pretty high amount of depth to both its combat and synthesis, as these two aspects of gameplay are pretty intertwined and both very important to success in the game, especially if you had any desire to play on the highest difficulty. I wanted to make a video covering both of these aspects of the game in great detail. In this video, I want to guide you through how synthesis works, explain the intricacies of synthesis, and offer a lot of tips that can increase your crafting efficiency so you can have all of the best equipment and items, and of course, do a lot of damage. And I also wanted to explain how the combat works and how you can use these systems in combat to have the most success. If you enjoy RPG guide content like this, do be sure to subscribe to the channel as it does help me out so much. Let's get into it. At first glance, the synthesis in this game may not seem too complicated, but there does end up being a lot more to it over time. The general principle of synthesizing any item is that you need the right materials. Usually, you will need 3 or 4 specific items, whether a material you gathered in the field somewhere, or something else you crafted beforehand that is required to craft the new material. And once you have added the required materials, you have the option to immediately craft the item, or you can add 3 more materials. And these 3 new materials are from full categories, giving you a lot more options of what to add. You can create the item without adding these materials, and if you don't need the material to craft into something else or for combat or anything, it's fine to stop there. But there are still some benefits to doing so. Firstly, let's talk about item level. Each material you collect, or each item you synthesize or craft has an item level. This is listed right above the name of the item. The higher the item level, the stronger the effect of the item, which is right below the item name. Each item you can craft has a potential unique effect you can raise by raising the item level. Essentially, using materials that have higher item levels will raise the item level of the item you are trying to craft, and using more materials will also raise the item level further. So essentially, if you are trying to create a strong item, you'd want to use materials with higher item levels. This level during base synthesis will max out at 99, but can be raised all the way to 120 with the enhanced feature that we'll talk about later. A higher item level will give you a better effect, and what this effect is usually depends on the item you are crafting. For equipment, it may be some kind of bonus effect like health restoration during your turn or more skill damage. For bombs, it might be a chance to apply a status effect. For synthesis items, it may be a bonus to stats on equipment or item power if you are able to use the item during synthesis properly. Now, there's a lot more to synthesis than just the item level of equipment. The main central feature of synthesis in this game involves gift colors. So essentially, every item in the game comes with 2 colors assigned to it that you can see in the bottom left of the icon. And these colors are referred to as the left gift color for the color on the left, and the right gift color for the color on the right. Simple enough so far, right? During synthesis, you have the option of linking these colors together for additional bonuses. The first material you start with, only the right gift color will matter, and essentially you would want to link it to the item with the same gift color as its left gift color. Doing this will link the 2 gift colors together and add whatever the trait of the second item is to the item you are crafting. Traits are somewhat similar to effects in that they will add bonuses to the item you are crafting. However, unlike effects, which are static per item and dependent on item level, traits are pretty universal and can be added to any item. Now, I don't have time to explain what every trait does in a video like this, but they can usually provide some very strong bonuses to your equipment, like you can add additional skill damage to your attacks or add additional elemental damage to attacks. Or you can even increase the amount of uses of your bombs or add additional debuffs with them. Not every trait works on every single type of equipment, since some traits are specifically designed to work with bombs or items, and some with your weapons and armor, so ideally you are trying to get traits that are useful to the type of gear you would want to create on that gear. Back to crafting, each time you link a gift color in this way, you can add whatever the trait was to the item. Now, a crafted item can have only up to 3 traits, and if you add another, it will usually replace whichever trait is at the top. This often means if you're trying to link all of your gift colors, the early traits you add don't matter as much since you're likely going to be replacing them anyway. When you craft an item, one of 2 things will happen depending on what the item is. If you are crafting a consumable like a bomb or health recovery item, or equipment like a weapon or armor piece, you will craft one version of that item with all 3 of the traits you added. If you are crafting an item used in synthesis to create more powerful items, you will craft 3 versions of that item, and each version will have 1 of the 3 traits you added. This means if you are trying to get a specific trait on synthesis items, it's usually much easier to get that one singular trait you will need. There is one other aspect of traits that is important when you're synthesizing, and that is some traits can combine together to create more powerful traits. For instance, by linking an item with compress count, we can lower the uses of the item we are crafting to 1, but in exchange we can make that single usage of the item a lot more powerful. There's also a trait called compress count plus, which is the same trait but even more powerful. If we manage to link an item with both of these traits, the trait will combine into Force Use, which is an even more powerful version of this same trait. This trait can then be added to synthesis items, so we can use the more powerful trait immediately in synthesis, or just create a bomb by combining these two traits and using two other strong traits. This only works if you are able to link up all of the gift colors throughout with the proper traits. You might think this means you are at the whims of whatever the gift colors of the materials you collect are, but there are two major ways you can use to manipulate this. Now, raw materials you just collect in the overworld are always going to be locked to whatever gift color you happen to get, but any item you synthesize, you can manipulate the gift color of rather easily. Each item has a default gift color value which will show up after you add the required materials to the item, but once you get to the category screen, you may notice that whatever the second to last item you have linked in the chain is what the gift color of that item is going to change into. This means you can very easily manipulate any synthesis item into the exact color you want it to be, so you can link the items together and get the exact traits you want. Usually, every category will have a couple items that are always synthesis items you can use to accomplish this, so you don't have to rely on materials, and you can get those traits you want. This is not to say you won't eventually have items that you need to rely on materials for, but that's where the other manipulation comes into play: catalysts. Catalyst comes in two types. The first will automatically change the color of any item to the gift colors of the catalyst you are using. This means you can link any material you have to anything else, which is very nice if you're trying to combine specific traits or get a specific trait on an item. The second will change the entire category of an item to something else, so you can link a different type of item. This has a lot of uses as well, including being able to link exclusive items that can obtain traits nothing else can, like the bomb catalyst, but more on that later. Regardless, this can also increase your options or just make synthesis easier in many cases. You can also use the color catalyst to influence the gift color of your final crafted item as well, which is also very useful if you have mapped out how to get your perfect item. Being able to influence gift colors can also help you get bonuses to certain synthesis items, which require your item to be a certain gift color as well, such as the calm blue flame, giving an item +3 uses if you are able to link a red or blue gift color in synthesis. Now, very quickly, let's talk about recipe morph. So recipe morph is usually the process by which you unlock a lot of recipes in this game, where you will create an item, and you can add a specific item or material to that item that will allow you to morph the item into a more advanced item while keeping the current traits. This often means you can have a very long chain going from the start of your recipe tree all the way to the end if you really want, by just continuing to add the right item. The recipe tree will either tell you this item, or you can figure it out yourself. Now, you may think this may be a very strong option to make very powerful items, but in all honesty, it's not actually that useful outside of unlocking the recipes, unless you have no way to get a certain trait otherwise. So once you have a recipe unlocked from Item Morph, you can immediately craft that item. Now, yes, you can get a higher item level easier if you transfer from the beginning, which can be nice earlier on in the game, but once you get better materials, this doesn't really matter at all. The main reason Item Morph typically is not as good as just crafting the item from base is that you cannot carry over synthesis bonuses with Item Morph. What this means is that if you have any specific synthesis materials you added to an item before morphing it, any bonuses from those items do not transfer. If you used an ingot, which is supposed to increase your weapon attack, it doesn't actually transfer that bonus between the morphs. Since Item Morph immediately puts you on the second stage of synthesis where you're adding your category materials, this means any of the required base materials will never be factored into the final strength of your crafted item. So if the item you're crafting has the potential to have a really strong synthesis bonus from a base material, once again using the calm blue flame as an example for the sun ring item, which will give +3 to its usage, then it is more beneficial to craft this item directly for the more powerful item. You can still easily hit the max item level later in the game with better materials. Item Morph definitely has its place, and it's very important for actually unlocking recipes, but it is not required to get the absolute best items in this game. I also want to mention quickly that there is valid reasons for not linking everything, like if you already have the exact traits on an item you want, but want to buff the item level more, you can always add a high level material without the right gift color to buff that up without messing up your current traits. Or you can link the first two materials and the last two materials, but not the middle two, in order to influence traits as well. So don't feel like you need to link everything, because there are valid reasons for not linking also. Before we move on to an example showcasing the entire process and how you can get some really strong items, I want to explain the Enhance feature. Enhancing item is kind of the final step in the synthesis process. After you crafted your level 99 item, you can now enhance the item to be even more powerful all the way up to level 120. This process is not all that much different than base synthesis. At the start, you select the item you want to enhance and then select a Geist Core. As you progress through the game, you will get these, and they all have bonus effects when enhancing your item. For instance, the yellow core will lower the amount of money needed to enhance the item while increasing the uses of a consumable item. Red increases the stat boosts on equipment traits. Green will lower the levels of your talents, which I'll explain in a second, but also allow you to create very strong traits when you combine certain traits. Pick one of these, and in the next menu, you'll see a list of the current fairies and party members. I believe these are referred to as the talents. You may see your party members multiple times if you've leveled up certain parts of their skill tree, each with different gift colors, since this selection will allow you to link 3 additional times to add even more powerful traits either from your party members or from the fairies, or combine traits into more really powerful traits. For the party members, their potential traits are static, but the fairies you collect in the randomly generated dungeons can have a wide variety of traits that you can potentially add to your items here, so you don't have to worry about materials as much. They can also come with their own gift colors and have to be linked properly for it to work. Additionally, they can come with a couple exclusive skills which can also be used to create very powerful traits. Make sure you're on the lookout for fairies with good traits and high levels so you can reach the level 120 cap easier. You can also make sure not to transfer traits if you like your current traits and only want to raise the item level by making sure the trait isn't compatible with the item. Overall though, the core feature here still works the same as Synthesis does. So that was a lot of information, but I never like to do these guides without showcasing some kind of practical example. So I want to try to guide you through the entire process of how I made a really powerful bomb item in this game. So the item I want to make is the Sun Ring. We can see it has a base power of 226, but I want to make this as strong as possible, because I want to hit that damage cap or get as high as I can. So I started by making an alchemic clay that had compress count, because I was going to need this in order to make a bomb that I wanted to make before making the Sun Ring. So I was going to make the Catastro Craft with compress count on it. The alchemic clay is one of the required items, so I wanted to make sure I could link that up early and get the compress count trait on this craft. Now, the only trait I actually want on this is going to be force use, which is compress count and compress count plus. So I use the sort feature to make sure I can get the force use trait on this item, and that is going to be the only trait I put on this bomb. And I also want the bomb to be blue and red. That's why I use the Catastro Craft instead of any other item, because I wanted it to be a blue-red item. Now I am going to enhance the item using the green Geist Core. So, what I am looking for here is specifically the Guardian's Pride trait, which I can only get from Slade, and specifically from a yellow gift color. So I'm going to kind of combine myself in a way where I can get that yellow gift color without adding any additional traits to this item. That's going to allow the Guardian's Pride trait that Slade has to combine with the Force Use to give me Final 1+, the absolute strongest version of this Compress Count trait. It was important that this is the only trait on the bomb because this is how we can transfer the Final 1+ to the other material. Remember when I mentioned that there is a bomb catalyst earlier and we can change the entire category to bombs? Well, we can actually add bombs to synthesis, but whatever the top trait is going to be the one that is transferred, so we want to make sure that that is the Final 1+ trait, so we can get the most powerful version of this trait onto the item we are trying to craft. In this case, it's going to be a tool set, because tool sets give a bonus to synthesis if it has certain colors, increasing your item power further. I also wanted to make sure it was red and blue as well. That was also very important to make sure that our gift colors align when I make the final item. I am also going to be doing the same thing here for the Calm Blue Flame. I actually need 2 of these. I need one that is blue-red, and I need one that is red-blue. You will get the Usus +3 bonus regardless, as long as we have one that is blue, one gift color that is blue, or one gift color that is red. So it does not matter the order or anything like that. It doesn't even matter if they're both red and blue. You just need to have one of those gift colors. And I make sure that I have a blue-red and a red-blue, because that's going to be important later. And once again, we use that bomb catalyst to make sure we can get this Calm Blue Flame, and we get the +3 use bonus on it as well. This is going to be really, really important, since as you might know, Final 1+ gets a bonus based on how many uses an item has. I do almost the exact same thing for my second Calm Blue Flame, but this time around I just link one additional item at the end, so I can influence the gift color to be my second to last item, so I get my blue and red Calm Blue Flame this time around instead of the red-blue. Once I have this, I can actually create the Sun Ring now. So, the Sun Ring, one of the base materials is already a Calm Blue Flame, so we can get an additional +3 uses from here that we cannot get if we were to try to recipe morph into it. It is very, very important if we're going to be using the Final 1+ trait to get as many uses as possible, so we're definitely going to want to make sure that we use the Calm Blue Flame here. Once we've added all of our base materials and we get to the second section, you'll see where the plan and all of the gift colors kind of comes into action here. So first of all, I can add a tool set in the second slot here on the Sun Ring, and it needs to have a red gift color for its left gift color to make sure it can chain into what we need here, and that'll also make sure it activates the Power Plus trait. So I use my Final 1 tool set. And then I'm going to use a catalyst here to change the ingredient type so I can add another calm blue flame to increase my uses further. Since as you know, Final 1 increases the damage based on how many uses you have on your item, but it lowers the amount of uses to 1. But based on how many uses you have, you can get a lot of additional power here. I recommend using the sort feature to find what you are looking for sometimes, because I was trying to find the exact calm blue flame by just scrolling, and I was like, you know what, this is not a good idea. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of that sort feature. We can get 3 different Final 1 Plus traits. This, once again, will increase the damage by 25% for every use of the item, and if we have 3 of them, that's 75% for every use of the item. So if we get additional uses from the plus blue, calm blue flame here, we can get a lot of benefit here. The final item here can always be the calm blue flame because of the type of category it is. So we're able to once again chain another calm blue flame, just with the opposite gift color this time around. And we get all 3 Final 1 Plus traits on here, making the most powerful item we pretty much can before enhancement. And speaking of enhancement, we are going to be doing that next. So we make a very powerful Sun Ring with 3,490 power, but we can buff this up even further to level 120 here. And what we're going to be doing with that is using the Yellow Geist Core, because that increases our uses even further. And as you know, the increasing uses is the best way to kind of get even more damage. But we don't want to overwrite our Final 1 Plus traits, so we make sure to use traits specifically that do not overwrite any traits, while also still being able to link the gift colors here to make sure that we can get our maximum item level here. And that's really all that we have to do at this point in time. Just link everything and make sure that we keep our Final 1 Plus traits on here to get the most damage possible. So I do end up trying to link Guardian's Pride, I think, just to see what it does, but I just want to mainly make sure that I keep that level 120 item level here. It doesn't do anything. I start the enhancement and we get an item level of 5,022, all the way up from a base power of only about 200. So a very, very powerful item was created here. Remember the Sun Ring for later, because it's going to be important for part of the combat section where I show you how to do a lot of damage. With all of that done, let's go ahead and move on to the combat section of the video. Truth be told, this isn't super complex of a system. There is a lot to it, but there isn't a lot that I would think would need to be explained in a lot of detail, so I just kind of was going to combine that so I didn't have to make 2 separate videos when I didn't really know if there was going to be as much to say about this part of the video. Regardless, there's a lot of really cool things you can do, so I figured it is worth explaining and is worth talking about, and I do want to show off some really high damage a little bit later in this video. So, let's talk about the combat. So, essentially, this is a turn-based combat system where you have a front line and back line, and all 6 party members can very easily be involved in the combat in any kind of given battle. It is a turn order system where you are obviously going to be trying to manipulate it to get as many turns as you can and prevent the enemy from moving as often. There's a lot of ways that you can accomplish this, but let's talk about the basic features a little bit more first. Very quickly, since I almost forgot in this video, I'll very quickly explain the 4 stats to you. First of all, you have attack. This is how much damage you're going to deal with skills and normal attacks. Then you have defense. This is how much damage reduction you have. The more higher you have, the less damage you take from enemies. Then you have speed. The more speed you have, the more turns you get, and the less turns the enemies will have since you'll be moving more than them. You can also reduce the wait time between your turns with some other effects as well. And then finally, there's the dex stat. This is actually nothing to do with hit rate or anything like that. It actually affects how much damage you can deal with items. You want to have a dex of 120 if you're going to be using any of the highest level items, since you lose damage on your items the less dex you have compared to the item level of the item, so 120 is the maximum you need for that. All of the 3 alchemist characters do have the highest dex possible. Obviously, you have your very generic normal standard attack. This doesn't really do much of anything except restore your AP when you use it, but it does do some okay damage. Everyone's basic attack is physical based except for Wirbel's, which is magic based. Other than that, though, it is just kind of your standard basic attack. You use it to restore AP, and if you have nothing else that you can possibly do. Then you have your skills. This is the resource that uses your AP. Skills are essentially more powerful attacks, or very strong buff effects, or have some kind of unique effect that you can use, but it does generally cost AP to use. If you run out of AP, you're obviously going to have to normal attack to get your AP back so you can use your skills again. And then, of course, you have your items. You can use items in combat, and items can be one of your best sources of damage, and can be used to heal your ally party members, or even apply buffs or something like that. Probably the most defining and important feature that this game has is the multi-action feature. If you have enough TP, which is the resource that are the stars above the character health bars, you can select this option, and then you can select up to 2 different characters in your backline, and that can allow them to perform actions as well at reduced AP consumption, so you can use skills for less AP. This can even be 0 if you use your top skill, and that can be very, very nice for just kind of conserving your AP, and it can be a very useful feature for resource management. This will also move the last person who attacks to the front row. And this can allow you to control which characters are in the front and which characters are in the back at any given time, as long as you kind of know how to manipulate and use this. And you can also save some of your characters that might be lower on health if you want to just kind of move them to the back line but still have access to your skills. This can allow you to use someone in the middle slot here and just use their skills without ever removing them from the back line, which can be very beneficial if you have someone without really a lot of defense but has some really powerful buff skills or something like that. In addition, you can also use TP to use the interrupt feature, which can allow you to take the next turn no matter what to use an item. These can be great features to use to kind of manipulate the turn order, and the interrupt feature in particular can allow you to kind of influence if you can get the bonus effects on turns or get the negative effects on the enemies in some cases, which can be very useful to have. TP can be a little bit harder to refill though, so make sure that you are kind of using it wisely and kind of conserving it for when you really need it, since you can very easily run out and just not have any for quite a long time in this game. Not that the game is too hard that it really needs that, but it is important to keep in mind. If a backline member uses a healing skill or a buff skill, they will stay in the backline as well if you use a damage skill with your frontline party member. So this can be a way to kind of get that extra turn from your backline party member without removing your character from the front line if you want to keep them in the front line, but also want to get that reduced skill consumption or need a heal or something like that. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do with this feature, and it is going to be one of the most important and defining features of this game. Next up, let's talk about the Unite gauge and the important effects that you can get from that. The Unite gauge is in the bottom left corner of the screen, and essentially, using skills that require more AP will fill the Unite gauge further. This can actually make it a pretty decent strategy to have skills that reduce your AP consumption because you get a lot of really powerful effects from the Unite gauge. When you have a Unite gauge of 2, if you have 2 characters that move in a row, the character that moved first will attack again after the second character moves with a bonus attack. Once you get to Unite gauge of 4, this will happen with all 3 characters, where if you have 3 characters that move in a row, the 2 characters that move before the 3rd character will also be able to both attack afterwards with a bonus attack. This can be a great reason to try to manipulate turn order in your favor, and there's a lot of really good skills that can do this, such as Reassist skill, which automatically moves the next party member up in the turn order to move next, or Totally skill, which moves an enemy backwards in the turn order, allowing you to kind of manipulate things in your favor to get a lot of additional bonus attacks here. Your damage and stun will also increase as you kind of increase this Unite gauge, and once you get to a Unite gauge of level 5, that is when it is maxed out, and you can activate a burst phase for your Unite gauge. It is a very viable strategy to focus on high AP skills with reduced AP skill consumption, and then just using your Unite gauge as soon as possible in combat because you get a lot of very powerful effects while you are in this Unite phase. You get a lot of additional turns in a row, and upon moving 3 times in a row in the Unite gauge, of your 5 total turns that you get during Unite, you will be able to do a special bonus attack, a big, giant, final finishing move, basically. And this is, I thought was called like the burst attack, but apparently the entire phase is called the burst phase. So, but I think you increase the damage on the skill tree with the burst attack there. And this attack is really powerful. It's dependent on the character, but it is very strong. You get all the other additional bonuses of the Unite gauge, such as when you move multiple times in a row with your characters. And this can be another additional way to kind of influence the turn order by just kind of moving your characters up and getting a lot of damage, hopefully, in the fight. Since once this phase ends, you go all the way back to Unite level 1, and you don't get any of the bonus effects anymore until you refill the gauge again. All of the bonus follow-up attacks are really powerful in this phase, so this can be a great time to try to manipulate the turn order to get as many attacks off as you can. Just kind of make sure that you can get all 5 attacks off in a row if you need to, just to kind of make sure you get all of those bonus attacks if you need them. And that way you'll probably burst through basically any enemy in the entire game as long as your gear is good enough. This is really powerful and a really strong thing that you should definitely be taking advantage of in combat. Next up, let's talk about enemy stun gauge. There isn't a whole lot to this. Basically, if you do a certain amount or a lot of attacks to an enemy, you can stun the enemy, which will move them back in the turn order and prevent them from moving until their next turn. And you also get some additional damage and bonus effects as well. There isn't really a lot to this. It's just a nice extra feature to just kind of make sure you can manipulate the turn order further. And it's a good way to get a lot of additional damage if you're able to combine it with Unite meter and stuff like that especially. It's a pretty good strategy to stun the enemy and then activate Unite, I would say. Next up, let's talk about item mix. So as you may expect, items are very powerful if you're able to craft really powerful items. But there's also the ability to mix items in this game. Certain items and certain combinations can allow you to use very powerful skills at the end of using your items, which will do even more damage. And this can be very powerful because item mix seems to be affected by skill damage. So if you put skill damage on your character when you're doing item mix, you can get even more additional damage. And combining 2 very powerful items can give you a very strong item mix. In fact, this is probably the best way to get the achievement for 9999 damage in this game. In order to use item mix, you're going to need to use your TP to make sure you have two of your characters moving and that they both combine items that are compatible with each other. And that way, so you're going to need one front line and one front backline character to do this, or two backliners if you have two TP, and you can just combine their items together. So there are multiple ways to kind of trigger item mix like this, but you do need to have the TP to make sure that you can use this. The reason I wanted to bring this up is if you remember that sun ring I crafted from earlier that has that 5,000 power, you can actually item mix this with a moon ring item. And if you have another really powerful moon ring, it's not as powerful as the sun ring in my case, but I could make it nearly as powerful if I wasn't as lazy. You can create a very, very powerful kind of fire-based explosion attack here, which is very, very strong. So you can kind of see the benefits of item mix here. Now, I will say one thing that we did kind of discover is that buffs can stack infinitely for your backline as long as they don't take your turns, and you can stack infinite crit damage by using this really funny ice cream item here. This can get you some absurd numbers if you have a lot of uses of it, and can restore your item uses in combat with a certain accessory, and this can allow you to hit numbers way, way higher than you're probably ever intended to. But it is a very easy way to kind of take advantage of this, and even if you don't do this, you can still make a really powerful item mix with the kind of crafting that we've done, and very easily hit that damage achievement anyway. Item mix can be one of the strongest options you have available in combat if you're willing to put in the work in synthesis. The final feature of combat, before I kind of talk about character balance and kind of the unique things they can do, is just the guard feature. This is not really much to this either. Basically, if you hold down the guard button when enemies attack, you take reduced damage, and if you perfectly time your guard, you take even more reduced damage. This is just kind of a skill mechanic, and if you get better at it, that's really nice. And you can also kind of change the speed of combat as well, and it doesn't really make the timing any worse if you play on the fastest speed, if you do want to play on the fastest speed. You can still very easily nail this timing or learn the timing for any of the attacks in the game, and I don't think it's anything too difficult. It's definitely not Expedition 33 or anything like that. It's just kind of a general Paper Mario mechanic. Before I wrap up this video, just a couple other things to mention. There are a lot of really good traits that kind of increase the amount of damage you can do with other elements. It says they add like an additional attack that's like 30 power or something like that for like magic, for fire, and like stuff like that. Those are really, really powerful effects. You can get a lot of extra damage out of those. Those are some of the best traits that I recommend using in combat if you can. All in all, I was really impressed with like the character balance in this game. It does feel like every character has their use. Rias is really good at manipulating turn order and kind of giving crit buffs to characters. Slade is really good at being kind of a frontline tank and just kind of making sure enemy aggro is on him with the taunt. Raze is really good at physical damage and being really, really fast. Verbal does a lot of magic damage and has some really good elemental coverage. Sophie's are really good at breaking the enemy. Toteri's really nice as a healer and can also help manipulate the turn order while just kind of offering all kinds of different elements. And Duplicate is really, really nice if you want to focus on using certain items. There's a lot of things that these characters can do, and I did not feel like any character was useless, so that was very, very nice as well. All in all, though, some of the easiest ways you can have success in combat is just focus on massive item damage just by finding the right item mixes, making really powerful items with really powerful traits, or focus on getting your Unite gauge up as much as possible by kind of reducing the AP consumption of your skills, and just kind of making sure that you can get that Unite gauge level 5 as fast as possible so you can do your big, fast bonus attack. Regardless, though, this game is not all that difficult if you're willing to put the work into crafting, willing to put the work into learning, and willing to put the work into your preparation. The combat itself should follow, and it shouldn't be anything that difficult. I think that is probably going to cover it for basically everything I really wanted to talk about in this guide. If you want to know more about specific traits, more about very specific strategies, I'm sure there'll be plenty of things put online for that, but I think that's going to cover it for the kind of the basic video I wanted to kind of show you guys here. So thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you learned something from watching this video, and if you did, please do once again be sure to subscribe. I make videos and guides on a lot of RPGs. I don't know if I'll make any more on this game, but I do hope you did enjoy and learn something. If you did, I do really like the Atelier series. I want to make more videos on this series in the future, so please do look forward to that. Thank you guys so much once again for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully I'll see you back here soon.